Hey folks, and welcome to iWizard. So today I'm going to be talking about Ayn Rand's second book, the novella Anthem. This is a controversial dystopian classic, and it's one that I would definitely put up there with other dystopian masterworks like Brave New World and 1984. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back. Jordan here. So this is a reread for me. I'll definitely never forget the first time I read Anthem. It was in the spring of 2009, not long after I met my now wife, NIKKI, and I was actually at the courthouse fighting a traffic ticket I'd received, and the wait was taking forever. The courthouse was packed, and so I read this book in like 2 hours, sitting on a bench, waiting to meet with the state prosecutor to see if I could settle out of court. Anyway, I was blown away by how good this story was and how much Rand was able to accomplish in it's like 105 pages. So before we get into the big ideas and what I liked, I want to give you guys a brief synopsis. Set in a dystopian future where individuality has been eradicated and society is governed by strict collectivist principles, Anthem is a story about the human struggle for meaning, purpose, achievement, and ultimately freedom. The story is narrated by a young man known only as Equality 7-2521, who lives in a future dark age where the concept of I is forbidden, and where citizens must refer to themselves as we and our, and to each other as they and them. In this society, individual achievement is derided and feared, self-expression is forbidden, and all aspects of life, thought, work, and even relationships are dictated by the collective will of the group. The Council of Scholars, speaking on behalf of the people, decides what your role and occupation in society will be, and there is no room for personal ambition, creativity, or autonomy of any kind. Very early on, those who stand out, those who can think and create and excel, are marginalized, and thus our protagonist, who possesses a tremendous brilliance of mind and tears through his schoolwork with ease, he is chosen to be a lowly street sweeper, an occupation he must inhabit for the rest of his working life. But as his dissatisfaction grows ever more each day, Equality 7-2521 begins to quietly rebel against the conformity that surrounds him. Despite the oppressive control that has been exerted over his mind, body, and spirit, he has an unyielding curiosity and thirst for knowledge. His journey of self-discovery begins when he and a friend stumble on an ancient underground tunnel, and they start experimenting with electricity, an activity forbidden in his society, a society shrouded by darkness and kept deliberately at near medieval levels of technological sophistication. As Equality 7-2521 continues his secret work, he learns more about the power of his own mind and his unique potential. But when he meets a kindred spirit, the beautiful Liberty 5-3000, he also learns about the transformative power of love. Anthem is a love letter to the ethos of individualism and a warning about the dangers of sacrificing one's potential for greatness at the altar of the collective. The protagonist's inner journey is one of awakening as he begins to understand the importance of human reason and creativity and the value of independence and the sovereign individual. In Anthem, Rand offers a timeless and inspiring message. The potential for greatness lies within each person, and it is only through self-reliance and the preservation of liberty that humanity can achieve true freedom. All right, so just a little synopsis there. I apologize if I am losing my voice. I'm just getting over being sick, so I'll try my best. But let's start with this. I wanted to say one thing before we get into the what I like section. I should mention that this book was published in 1938 in the UK first. And what's funny is that I had no idea it was published in the 30s the first time I read it. It feels so strikingly modern. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, so the story starts with a character who admits that he's committing the unforgivable crime of writing in a personal journal. But that's how 1984 starts. And then I come to a line in the book where the main character says, "We are the damned." And I'm like, hold on a second. There's a famous line in 1984 where Winston Smith says, "We are the dead," right? And then there's the love interest too. The love interest is very similar in both books. In Anthem, the main character meets a girl working out in the fields, and he nicknames her the Golden One. In 1984, Winston and Julia meet in a very similar fashion, and their special place is called the Golden Country. And so I always thought Rand had cribbed a little bit from Orwell, only to find out later that 1984 was published 11 years after Anthem. And there are definitely other similarities between the two books as well. So maybe, just maybe, Orwell was inspired by Rand's work. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but let's get into a little bit of what I liked about Anthem. So first of all, I'll just say that the story here is so elegantly written. The copy I have, what the publishers decided to do is the first half of the book is the revised American edition. This is the version that Rand republished in 1946. And then in the second half of the book, they give you Rand's revisions. And what's cool is it really is like a lesson in editing and revising. As for the story, this is such a great example of concision and restraint and the ability to tell a story and make the world and the characters feel real in just over the span of about 100 pages. And so that's really well done. And so I guess on a more philosophical note, one of the facets of this book that I find really compelling and interesting is Rand's sort of polemical critique of primitivism and of willful ignorance and of a society's embrace of anti-industrialism. So the story is set well into the future, and for whatever reason, we've decided in true Rousseauian fashion that we need to return to the earth. We need to return to our tribal roots. Individualism, it's gotten us nowhere. Reason, it can't be trusted because, after all, reason often undermines solidarity, and rational self-interest often results in solutions that work, but that yield unequal outcomes, right? Technology can't be trusted because, even if it makes life easier and streamlines our work, it puts people out of work sometimes, and it's not controllable. And the masters of technology just end up with the most power. And so values like individualism and self-reliance and capitalism and free choice, these things just make the world unfair and result in outcomes where the able, the most intelligent, the strongest, the best looking, the most innovative, the most creative, these are the people who end up succeeding. Self-expression, come on, this just leads to strife and atomization. So in short, we need to return to the herd, to a kind of bland, homogeneous, tribal solidarity. So in the name of attempting to achieve cosmic justice, in the name of getting rid of any and all natural inequalities, in the name of some utopian sense of fairness, you basically get a society where the citizens wear these simple tunics and togas. There's no electricity. Everything's done by candlelight. And anything strong, capable, powerful, or unique is looked at with tremendous suspicion. And so in this society, it has been decided that it is best not to think of ourselves even as individuals. We'll think of ourselves as cogs in a vast machine or mere units in a great chain of being. And we'll even redefine truth and say that truth isn't whatever is true or false, regardless of how we feel about it. Truth will be a matter of what will most enhance our solidarity. What is not thought by all men, one of the scholars says, cannot be true. What is not done collectively cannot be good. And so as a consequence of all of this, all of the futuristic, technologically advanced cities have become swallowed by nature. People live in these bland, dystopian communities. The architecture is stale and old-fashioned. Fun is organized at community centers, like in the Soviet Union.
I was impressed by the youth programs that they have, cultural programs which go far beyond what we do in this country.
Everything's a program, right? Food is provided by the state. You just line up and you eat your meal at the cafeteria with your brothers.
American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food.
That's a good thing. In other countries, people don't line up for food. The rich get the food and the poor starve to death.
The family, as the first pre-political institution and the fundamental organizing unit of society, that's been abolished. Mating is rationed and carried out through this controlled, perfunctory, bureaucratic process, and children are raised in community centers instead of homes. But all of this flows from a centralizing principle that in order to achieve the kind of equality of outcome they want, in order to usher in this revolutionary utopia, you actually have to change human beings. And this goes all the way back to the Soviet Union, because people would say, look, this idea that you guys are trying to achieve, the Bolsheviks, of total equality, of a society where we just sacrifice ourselves to our brothers, that's not natural. It sounds nice in theory, some people would say, but it'll never work in practice. Well, what's funny is that the Bolsheviks actually knew this, which is why they said, we basically need this new type of man, the new Soviet man, they called it. We need people to essentially become, as Marx called it, species being. The idea that men should see themselves not as sovereign individuals, but really as just members of a larger species. And that when we think of others, we ought to think of them as our brothers in the abstract. Your love should be universal. It shouldn't be private. There should be no private loyalties or special bonds or attachments that you would have that would transcend your love for your brother. That would be discrimination, after all. And the main character, Equality, makes this very point. Quote, International 4-8818, and we are friends, he says. This is an evil thing to say, for it is a transgression, the great transgression of preference, to love any among men better than the others, since we must love all men, and all men are friends. And so while this certainly sounds creepy, the idea that it's discrimination to love your mother or your wife or your father or your best friend or even your neighbor more than you love a stranger in some other place far away, or just, I don't know, your fellow man in the abstract, there are prominent philosophers living today who argue this very point. The Princeton philosopher Peter Singer, in his famous essay, Famine, Affluence, and Morality, he says the exact same thing. He says, proximity doesn't matter. You owe the same duties, obligation, and charity to random people halfway across the world that you've never met that you do to your own family and your own community members, and that not to care for a starving child in, well, he was writing about Bangladesh, as much as you do a kid who lives down the street from you in your own neighborhood. That's discrimination, Singer says. There's no subsidiarity. There's no ordo amoris, just universal equality. It's basically John Lennon's Imagine. Imagine there's no countries. Imagine there's no possessions, nothing to kill or die for, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world, and the world, will live as one. And that is the disturbing reality. It's a pretty song. I love that song, by the way, but that's the disturbing reality here in Anthem. Another big idea I found fascinating is Rand's distinction between two types of societies and two very different conceptions of freedom. And this moment comes when Equality and his best bud, International, find this mysterious shaft, this hidden tunnel that no one else knows about. And so this is about a quarter of the way through the book. We shall go down, we said to International. And I'm quoting here. It is forbidden, they answered. We said, the council does not know about this hole, so it can't be forbidden. And they answered, since the council does not know of this hole, there can be no law permitting to enter it, and everything which is not permitted by law is forbidden. And so this is such an important distinction. I won't spoil what they end up doing in that hidden shaft, but we learn there that this society and most unfree societies, what they do is they give you a list of things you're allowed to do, a list of things you are permitted to do. And then everything not on that list is forbidden. So notice the logic there, the order of operations. That means that anything you do, you're doing by permission of some ruler. And if the ruler hasn't thought of the thing before, if the ruler hasn't put the action on his list of pre-approved things you can do, you're automatically banned from doing it, which means really that anything new or novel or innovative is automatically banned. Whereas free societies, on the other hand, free societies work basically the opposite way. Free societies say, here is a brief list of things that people, and that includes ordinary people, but even the government, may not do to others. These are called negative liberties because they would violate your rights. Aside from that, you're free to do whatever you want. So in this case, you're allowed to do everything except for this small list of things that are really just meant to protect people's rights. You can have a Bill of Rights. Whereas the former situation is you're allowed to do nothing except for this tiny list of pre-approved things. Notice here that in that case, the burden of proof is on you to explain why you should be able to do a thing, whereas the burden of proof really, in a free society, should always be with the government to explain why they're taking away your right to do something. That's on them, not you. Because you have natural rights that are inalienable. Here's another thing. I also like that the main character here has such an immediately graspable and sort of strong narrative voice. This is an instantly compelling protagonist. You feel his pain and the fact that he's trying to stay optimistic to and loyal to the principles of his society. But at a certain point, and I'll tell you, that point really comes when the Council of Scholars decide to make him a street sweeper for life. That's sort of when the dam breaks. And not that there's anything wrong with being a street sweeper, and he accepts his lot with class and grace, but this is a society that rewards conformity and weakness and that punishes strength and ability. It was not that the learning was too hard for us, says Equality. It was that the learning was too easy. This is a great sin, to be born with a head which is too quick. It is not good to be different from our brothers, but it is evil to be superior to them. And Rand really does a great job at illustrating the sort of fear and suspicion that this complex produces. It's been explained to us, Equality says, that all things on earth belong to all men. Yet as we stand at night in the great hall, removing our garments for sleep, we look upon our brothers and we wonder. The heads of our brothers are bowed. The eyes of our brothers are dull, and never do they look one another in the eyes. The shoulders of our brothers are hunched, and their muscles are drawn as if their bodies were shrinking and wished to shrink out of sight. And a word steals into our mind as we look upon our brothers, and that word is fear. There is fear hanging in the air of the sleeping halls and in the air of the streets. Fear walks through the city, fear without name, without shape. All men feel it, and none dare to speak. So it's the fact that Equality is so smart and so capable that they keep him away from the jobs that require those attributes and put mediocre minds there instead. I forget which philosopher said this. It was probably Nietzsche or something like that. The idea that you know a corrupt society by its tendency to punish people for their virtues. And that's the straw that really breaks the camel's back for Equality, that really breaks his faith in the system. It's like, you know, people are willing generally to follow the rules, even bad, corrupt rules, if there's consistency, if it pays off somehow to follow those rules. But excelling in this system, following the rules, being a true believer, all of that just makes Equality an abomination of the able. There is evil in your bones, Equality 7-2521, for your body has grown beyond the bodies of your brothers. That's what his teachers tell him. And it really is like something snaps in him. And so, yeah, he starts bucking the system and breaking the rules and following his own path. And lastly, I will just end with, I really like the way that Rand sticks the landing and that the ending is so satisfying and uplifting and empowering and philosophical. So I won't spoil it, but I'll say the ending, she really does a good job on that, and the ending is very satisfying. This is an excellent book. I love Ayn Rand's work. So happy to review her books. This one gets a 5 out of 5 stars from me. An absolute masterpiece. Great novella. It's an easy read. It'll take you a couple of hours. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Follow us on Goodreads, on Facebook, on Instagram. Tip your starving booktuber over at Patreon. We'd really appreciate that. And until next time, happy reading.